Check, check, 1, 2.
Hi.
Amy, are you already home? You're home? Okay.
Yep.
All right. All righty. So we're going to call to February 14th, General Government A Subcommittee State Agency presenters, and we have the Office of the Secretary of State here. Madam Secretary, do you want to say a few opening words?
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon, co-chairs, ranking members, and members of the committee. I'm joined here today in person by many members of my team. If any of them speak, they will certainly introduce themselves. And also online, we should have Michelle Provost, our Interim Director of Program Monitoring and Fiscal Review. And just very briefly, I just want to say that between 2023 and 2026, this office will have implemented more election reforms than in the past 15 years combined. And we do this with a great amount of pride, yet our budget has not kept pace with this reality, and it's just not sustainable. So we look forward to answering any questions you have today.
Thank you. Perhaps you could go over the early voting piece of things so that we can understand what you're looking for.
Sure. So there's two early voting components. In this biennium, there was money that passed through our office that went directly to the towns. And none of that money is in the governor's budget. So there's no funding for the towns at all. What is in the governor's budget is a cut to our costs related to early voting. So our costs have to do with things like printing certain documents. We provide the funding and always have historically for a number of years. If a town needs a new connection to the central voter registration system, we work with Frontier to get those lines securely established. So those funds are missing. And if a town needs a second early voting location, they will need a new hardline run for CVRS, the voter registration system. There are some software costs in there, so that's been removed from our existing budget.
Thank you. And the towns, how much did they receive?
The first year of the biennium was 1.3, right? And then the second was 1 million even, correct? Yeah. And that was 1.8, I'm sorry. So in the first year of the biennium, that was the 10,500 that was evenly distributed and went to all 169 towns. And then in the current year, there was 1 million allocated that our office, working with registrars, came up with a formula, also working with the Yukon Voter Center, a formula based on turnout, costs, etc. So I believe the minimum amount a town received was $2,500, and then it went up to for some of the larger towns.
How much up?
Does anyone remember offhand the spread and the formula? Yeah, we can give you the town by town allocation.
And where are we on new voting machines?
The tabulators have, you may know, there were 9 towns that did a pilot in November. Machines have started shipping. They're being done in priority order based on towns that have elections between now and November. So that process has begun. Everything will be shipped and people trained by June.
So who pays for the training?
It is, the company provides the training on the machines, and that's part of the overall contract. What's not covered by the bonding, of course, is our individual staff time. We have to coordinate the project with the vendor. The training involves, I think the exact number is 1,002 people. So they all have to come to our office here. So we are coordinating, as you might imagine, scheduling registrars, deputies, town clerks, and their assistants to all come to Hartford for a 3 to 4 hour training based on town size as a project in and of itself. So these are the types of hidden costs in the moving forward all of these projects.
Does anybody have any questions for the secretary? Representative Walker.
Thank you, and good to see you again, and happy Valentine's Day.
Happy
everybody.
Valentine's Day.
Don't say a word. She's bah humbugging Valentine's, yeah.
Celebrating a commercial.
Because we want love in the air, okay?
There is no such.
And we want chocolate
want love
covered
in the air.
strawberries. We want chocolate covered strawberries. See,
Plus chocolate covered strawberries, right? Representative? Nice.
Commercial endeavor.
Okay, so it's Friday, please.
Let's take a vote.
So, in the early voting, did you have like a benchmark or what you were trying to achieve in your early voting the first time, and have you paced yourself and seen increases? Do you see any problems in it? What are the things that you think you need to change, et cetera?
Yeah, my benchmarks were not related to number of voters, but success of the rollout, right?
Okay.
There were a lot of moving pieces that we had to coordinate. So I think it was very successful. Like any system, it needs some tweaks. We certainly will be recommending that we use tabulators instead of the envelope system moving forward. We have a lot of technical fixes in the GAE committee this year. We will, depending on what happens with the no excuse absentee voting ballot initiative, now that we can have no excuse voting, the early voting program may need to be amended to they both have to work together. So there may be a reduction in, I don't say number of days, but perhaps a reduction in hours of early voting. But these are items that remain to be seen.
So as far as you're concerned, the benchmarks that you had in your mind, you were able to accomplish?
Yeah, I believe so. I think it was very successful, and 41% of our voters voted during the early voting period. So that certainly far exceeded any estimate that I would have dared to dream.
Some of the, I mean, as you know, a lot of our big cities, we have a very low turnout.
Mhm.
Did you see the early voting improving on those in the big cities?
I did not see a direct correlation to turnout, but I also didn't expect to. Turnout, in my opinion, can be moved much further with education. And I think not having a voter education campaign really hurts the state when it comes to turnout. Because the types of issues that I hear people talk about the most have to do with I didn't know this, like a lot of people had no idea early voting was happening. They, most people had no idea it was open on the weekends until word of mouth got around. Which is why in the second week of early voting, the numbers kept going up. And the last weekend, we saw greater turnout than we had any of the prior days, because I think the word just got out there. I also hear a lot of people don't show up because they're confused or they're nervous. They don't know if they'll have a language accommodation. They don't know if there'll be a line. A lot of young voters have no idea what to expect. One young lady in Wilton once said to me last year, like, before early in 2023, like, how long should I allow myself to vote? 4 or 5 hours? And this was in 2023. I was like, no, I think you'll be fine in 4 or 5 minutes. But there's no education out there. So I think public education spending is a big part of healthy turnout.
Did you have an allowance for early voting in
Uh,
the state?
only zero for public education. The only early voting money we had was what I outlined.
Right.
The printing required. We had to create a training program for the registrars and the poll workers. We had to install some new CVRS lines. And just like some software updates so that we could track people when they voted early.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mhm.
Representative Acker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. Secretary Tom, great to see you as always.
Good to see you.
Appreciate the
Thank
work
you.
that you do. A couple of things, I'm sure it was already asked because I was 3 minutes late and they already got to it, but the blaring number in here is the reduction. And so I'm sure you probably just asked that in the first question. And I apologize for the late. I was celebrating Valentine's Day with the local officers. Had to throw that in. But not my, 169 towns are asking for more resources
Yes.
in this process. And then rather than the bump in money, we see the reduction. And again, I apologize for that.
Yeah,
question
I
again.
don't mind repeating it because I think it's important. I do want to make clear, so there are two types of cuts in the governor's budget. There are cuts to our existing budget line, and there are items that haven't been included at all. So the governor's budget has zero funds going to the towns for early voting. There's also zero funds for the ARPA funded Voting Rights Act. So there were 6 staff positions and other components of the Voting Rights Act that after June 30th won't be funded at all. So those are complete omissions. The cuts that you see here, the early voting cut, had to do with costs that we have in our office, certain printing, and then what I just mentioned a few minutes ago. Anytime a town needs an additional secure line to the voter registration system, which is how we're able to conduct early voting because you need real-time information. A new line has to be put in. So any town, now that they've done it once, I would imagine some of the larger cities and towns might want additional locations. New lines will have to be run, and historically that funding has come from the Secretary's office. So it's expenses such as that have been cut. And it's sort of connected to elections. There's also a cut in our printing line, and there's the presumption that it's related to the publishing of the blue books, But since I've been secretary, I have already significantly cut that line from 92,000 when I arrived to 21,000. So that 100,000 is actually cutting two really important things. One, the election forms that we are statutorily required to provide. We have to print posters, forms, etc., that we have to give to the towns. And also on our business services side, as you might imagine, we print a lot of letters, dissolution letters, follow-up letters, etc. So that printing line is, I think, penny wise and pound foolish, because we bring in a lot of income by sending out those dissolution letters. So I think that amount really needs to be adjusted because it's not blue books.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate that. I do see there was a slight reduction in other expenses on that side may include in some of that. Just more of a comment, and maybe we can talk after this. This is about the dollars here, but I did review the agency's audit. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of making sure that the auditors had a lot of questions and repeat incidents. So I would like, if we get an opportunity to meet with you, discuss that offline, but I do see that. And it as somebody new to the dollars and cents in here, I'm seeing that those were kind of some repeat offenders. I know that you're not too new to this position, but
Yeah, you should have seen it when I got here. I actually, who is Michelle? Are you able to address that quickly? Because many components had failed for many years prior to my arrival. So we really have gotten after some of those changes. Some of them are enduring and can't be fixed. Perhaps Chris Drake, you'd like to mention why those, yeah, sure. Because I think it's important, because we've sought a statute change that would allow us to clean up those audit items. And until that's granted, we can't clean them up.
okay.
Sure. Is this on?
Yeah.
Hi, Chris Drake, Director of Business Services Division. So one of the items mentioned on the audit report is what we call money on account. That's money that was left over from our old system, Concord. So if a filer filed something, they paid us $100, and then we ended up rejecting the filing, we would give them a credit of $100, and that we would apply towards the filing when they resubmitted it. Many people don't resubmit, if you can believe it. And so over time during Concord, and a lot of this happened while I wasn't director, we accumulated over $9 million in those monies on account. A lot of that money is decades old, and there's a state statute that says that we don't refund after more than 1 year. We've attempted to kind of propose some legislative solutions to that problem, but that's sort of one example of what the secretary was just referring to as a perpetual problem. And until we get a statutory fix, that's probably going to stay on the audit report indefinitely.
Well, let me know that statutory piece. I would like to
Okay.
take a look at that. So thank you for that
That'd be
input.
great.
I appreciate it.
Sure.
All set? Representative Nuccio.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Secretary. I hope you are well.
Thank you.
Um,
Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. I was there earlier, but I'm not feeling well, so I decided to come home. I have a question regarding the moving around of the Bridgeport moderator. The $150,000 was one place, then it got moved to Secretary of State. Is that money in your baseline here someplace? The Bridgeport elections monitor?
I actually didn't hear the question. Is the
Sorry.
money, yeah.
Is the $150,000 for the Bridgeport election monitor? It was, I can't locate exactly.
Oh,
where it is right
in
now.
the current budget? No.
It's not. Okay, because it was in the elections enforcement, but they said that it was transferred to the Secretary of State and built into your base.
Yeah, that's correct. So the election monitor is a legislative allocation if a bill passes. So when the bill passed last session, it was inaccurately sent to Seek, but they have no ability to spend it. It's the Secretary of the State who has to oversee the election monitor. So a lot of paperwork was done and they had to transfer it to us. But that funding has ended. So unless there's a new election monitor bill allocating new dollars to us to carry out that work, that program will be over.
Was that, I didn't realize that was a 1-year bill. I thought that was ongoing.
No, it's a bill that's been replicated several terms now.
So
But
it's in
it
your base though,
expires.
the actual is in your, the $150,000 would be in your 2024 actual, correct?
No, it wasn't in the actuals. We moved it by a point of in one of our sessions, we did it, moved it over from Seek to SOT, so it wouldn't have been built into the base of it. It was a separate line item for that. And then that line item hasn't continued into the 25, into the fiscal 26, 27, the next biennium. So we would have to add it in if that's something that we want to do as a separate line item.
So, So I guess maybe OFA, if OFA is there or something, like where are the actuals for that?
It would have not shown up in the personnel services. It would have been another line item. Do you guys?
Right, but it's not, there's no other line items in Secretary of State other than personnel services,
Right, this is a general budget. They're looking right now. This was a general budget accommodation and it did not, in the general budget, it did not have a line item. We just transferred the funds over. Senator Flexer's looking at me saying, do I know? Am I doing all right on this one? Guys, do you know what happened with that? I know it was paid out because I've talked to the senator from down there and she likes the process. It was a one-time transfer, so it doesn't show up as as part of the actualized budget.
Where would the actuals be then? Would they be in SEEC?
No,
Because they disappear then. If they're not in SEEC and they're not in Secretary of State,
they
there has
show
to
up.
be somewhere.
Yeah, but it doesn't show up in the budget per se. It shows up because it was a transfer. It shows up in that transfer product, just like deficiency dollars and other things. They show up in the deficiency dollars. It doesn't show up necessarily in the actuals. So there's another piece to actuals on one-time transfers, relatively speaking, kind of like carry forward dollars.
Okay, so in general though, Stephanie, this goes away. Like we don't have it anymore, right? You're under the impression that this is a one-time, like the one-time expense, and that unless it's funded again, this position doesn't exist anymore.
That's correct.
Okay, all right. So I think that's probably problematic. The reflect current requirements, there's a lapse in here about $300,000. Do you guys have a lapse in PS this year?
We do. I'll let Michelle take over in explaining those.
We do. We currently have 9 positions that are vacated, where are in the middle of recruitments for several of those. One position in particular, the position that I occupy, we conducted 2 recruitments just so we were sure that we, selected the perfect candidate for this job. And that's been the issue with several of our recruitments. We are just unable to get the right candidate for the position and oftentimes have gone into 2 recruitment processes, which has led to delays associated with refilling these vacancies. Some of them are high annual dollar salaries. In addition to, we have several manager positions that were vacated throughout the year. in addition to other clerical positions that we tend to fill quicker, but in general, they're the high dollar positions that we really want to make sure we have the key candidates for, the perfect candidate for, that have contributed to some of the lapse in funding that you're seeing in personal services.
And
Okay,
Michelle,
so-
could you just introduce yourself for the record?
Michelle
Name,
Provost, the interim director of management support services for the agency.
Do you happen to know what your lapse dollars total right now in PS?
Right now it's probably around 700,000, but I expect that's going to go a little bit lower depending on how soon we get candidates into the positions. We have two key positions right now that we're really pushing hard to fill by the end of February, hopefully by the end of March. The director of communications and our press secretary positions are both vacant. So if we can get those in there, and again, because they are appointed officials, there's flexibility with regards to what salary they start at. So we project on the low end, but they may come in mid-range. So it's hard to get an accurate assessment right now, but that is something that we can send you quarterly updates to if that's something you would be interested in.
No, that's okay. I'm just trying to get a level set of where we are and whether or not the $300,000 seems like a reasonable money for anticipated lapse in the next 2 years. So the only other question that I have, and I don't want to go back and rehash the whole thing, but if I remember correctly, the 1.8 and the 1 million that you were talking about for the early voting was all ARPA money, I believe, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and I know we had a good turnout statewide. One of my towns, I had well over 50%. I think it was 52 or 57% of people who voted early. It was really high. So there's no money in this budget anywhere to give any kind of grant funding to the towns to cover any upcoming early voting. It's all on them now from this point forward. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all that I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would point out that that was the governor's choice on this. So the governor said the Office of Policy Management Secretary said that he was not funding anything else for early voting, that the people voted for it and the people should pay for it, essentially.
Yep. Got it.
Senator Anwar.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Secretary, for your testimony. I've been reading your testimony and I've looked at the budget, and I think this is what Senator Austin has just alluded to. As I look at the budget, and I think you illustrated that very well, that you have existing needs that you had, but then there are more funds that are needed to do the business the right way so that we can make sure that every citizen in the state has an opportunity to vote the way they choose to. And the current budget in its current form is going to put your entire department at a very significant disadvantage, the way I'm seeing this. And I'm trying to understand, how did we get to this point? Because the legislatively and statutorily, you're mandated to do certain things. And now when you take the budget away from that, it puts everybody at a very difficult position. Can you reflect on this? How did we get to this point? And the second question after that.
It's a very good question, and I wish I knew. I don't have data in front of me, but if I believe urban lore, our office had more positions 20 years ago than we do now. But during, the budgetary woes of Connecticut, our headcount was reduced, and it has not been reinstated given the new reality that elections are just more complex. Our business registration rolls have grown exponentially over the last several years. The work of our office, we touch almost every Connecticut resident through all of the businesses that have to pass through our portals, and of course, all of the voters of the state. And when I look at some of the requests outlined in the documents that you have, there are 3 positions that we've requested because you said it's hard to do a good job, but I would take that one step further. It's actually hard to do our job at all. Forget about good or otherwise. And of course, everything we do requires a very high level of excellence, whether it's on the business registration side or the election side. Um, we requested 2 positions to handle program management in our elections division. An example I like to give is imagine if you asked your, I don't know, divorce attorney to then handle construction projects across 169 towns. The skill sets are different. We don't have enough diversity in our elections department to carry out all the very good legislation that passes through this building. And as I said, we've done more election reform just in my term so far than the last couple of decades. And the work is getting more sophisticated, the volume is much higher. And in addition to all of the voter facing projects like early voting, hopefully one day, no excuse, absentee voting, automatic voter registration, all of these reforms that we already have, there's a lot of back of the office projects that have to do with mandated reporting that we have to send to the federal government on a regular basis, voter roll updates. There are just countless projects. And on the business side, we know there are thousands of businesses that are formed outside of Connecticut that should be paying us money to operate in Connecticut, but we don't have the staff to literally contact them all. And we know that if we have that one staff position, we'd be collecting, even conservatively, another 700,000 annually. Best case, another 900,000 annually. So in a way, even if we added these 3 positions, we're still coming out ahead of the game. And I just think the risk to our election system by operating on a shoestring is frankly a risk I'm not comfortable taking, and I think it's too high. And I think the voters of Connecticut would think it's too high. So I come here with, thank you for the question, Senator. I just think we're at a point that is perilously close to the breaking point.
Thank you so much. And thank you for clarifying this because I saw this in my jaw drop that we as a legislative body, the governor has signed those bills, and then this is not a voter access friendly budget that you have, and it's not a business friendly and safe budget that we have. So, Madam Secretary, if your office can help us, if you know how it's tabulated right now, the budget that has been sent to us, if there was a similar tabulated form of your asks to make sure that your previous budget is held harmless, but also a request that is going to enhance. If we can put that in a tabulated form, it would be easy to understand and perhaps vote on and have conversation as we move forward through the process. And in your presentation really helped me quite a bit because yesterday I was scratching my head trying to make sense of why this is happening. And I still don't know why it's happening, but I don't think it should happen. And at least I'm standing to make sure that whatever we voted, whatever values we voted, we will make sure that we should fund those so that we can have pride in everything that we do in our state. So thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We'll certainly get those tabulated figures to you.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Representative Ryan, and I remind everybody, we are over our time limit now.
Why are you waiting till I'm talking to you?
Because we just went over our time limit. Representative Ryan.
I won't ask why you went over your time limit. But quickly, talking about the fact that the ARPA funds aren't available to give to towns anymore to help them with early voting costs. You did set up a system that required so many people in each of the towns. Are you going to be looking at that system to kind of decrease the burden on the community so that the cost wouldn't be as high?
The system. The system is actually at the bare minimum, which we did at the outset to minimize costs. The legislation calls for one person in a moderator position, but unfortunately, because of ADA and other requirements, our laws also call for dual party representatives for curbside voting. So the minimum is 3 for that reason.
Okay, so I get some not good information, because I heard that even the smallest towns required at least 5 extra people.
No.
That was a burden and obviously would have increased the cost. Okay, thank you.
You're
That's
welcome.
quickly enough.
And no other questions, Representative Ryan?
I'm afraid to ask any on this.
Right. Senator Flexer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't ask a lot of questions because I have ample opportunity to talk with you. I just wanted to ask about the process. And I guess my question is clerical and potentially political. Do we have a copy of the budget that you requested of the governor? And can we have a copy of that to educate us and help us evaluate what choices we should make here in this committee? And I guess perhaps for you, Madam Chair, I believe we had a conversation a number of years ago about constitutional officers having some more autonomy in the budgeting process for their agencies and not having their proposals have to be limited by another elected executive branch member. And I don't know if that's a conversation, particularly with what's happened to your agency, that should be revisited.
I'll answer in reverse order. I agree. It's a difficult way to run an agency that has responsibilities that you know better than anyone else. 2, we can certainly give you a copy of what we requested and we'll get that over to you. And 3, I don't think you have it currently.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Representative Ryan, would you like to ask another question? Anybody else have any other questions?
Don't mind going.
Go ahead.
That's fine for him.
It would have been fine for you too, but you were just afraid. I don't know what to tell you.
Just the piece you mentioned about the regulatory piece with the business registration piece, so that businesses outside Connecticut that come into Connecticut aren't getting registered? Is that, and that's what that job position would be?
I'll let you explain it more exactly. I
That'd
don't
be
want to
great, yeah.
misspeak.
And if it,
Hi, I'm Chris Drake again. Right, so we call those foreign businesses. So an easy example would be an LLC that's registered in Massachusetts. It does business in Springfield, but it also does business in Enfield or Suffield. That business is required to register with the Secretary of State's office as a foreign LLC. There are statutory penalties if they fail to register on time. We have a unit of people. There's one attorney and one paralegal that takes these cases, but they're currently at almost 1,000 case backlog. So just to handle the cases that we have, we could use another. We know for sure that if we cleaned up those cases, we could bring in, I think we estimated in our testimony, another $700,000. But those are just the cases we know. And if we had even more staff, we could actually do some investigation and try to find businesses that are thwarting that law, but aren't tattling on themselves. So
Okay.
that's just to clean up the backlog.
Yep, I'd like to get an appointment with you guys and discuss that, because I've been trying to do the regulatory side on, the contracting side of pieces. So I'm trying to do some more on that and occupational licensing investigation. So look forward to getting together with you, and thank you so much for that answer. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the second time.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, you're all set.
Thank you so much.
Well-
Enjoy your evenings.
Thank you. We were gonna adjourn this public hearing with the General Government A Subcommittee State Agency presenters, and we are coming back now. We're coming back at 4 o'clock. I tried to get rid of this part of the meeting. I don't know why, but now we'll come back at 4 o'clock for the public hearing.